Hi everybody, it's Annette from The Art of Intuition, and today we're going to talk about attachment and connection and how our attachments start to shift into connections and how that takes place for us. I'm in the middle of closing down some reality, so I'm really getting a good look at things I'm connected to and things that I am attached to and the difference. So we're going to talk about attachment. And we only have attachment to things when we're in our human consciousness about the thing. There's still something we want from the thing. There's a story we have around the thing. There's something we think we can only get from that thing. And we have a lot going on intertwined in that thing. And that's why when that thing leaves, we have a lot of grief that goes on with it leaving. You're only really going to grieve something you're attached to. You're not really going to grieve something you're connected to. Okay, so if we're in a grieving process for it and we're sad and there's a sadness that comes up, then we have an attachment to it. You might not have an attachment to the thing, you might just have an attachment to what the thing represents to you. Sometimes with people, we might say, no, it's the person. Sometimes if it's like furniture or something. And I had furniture leave the other day and I was like, it kind of made me a little sad. But it wasn't so much the furniture, it was just what it represented. So you're going to go through different iterations of that. It can be a direct attachment to the thing, or it can be just an attachment to what it represents for you. So sometimes we got to go a little deeper as to what is the grief about. Now, when we start grieving, sometimes if it's a severe grieving, we'll have a lot of tears come up. Sometimes it can just be a little bit of sadness, and we kind of let it come up, and it kind of goes on and kind of goes away on its own. But when we are in those phases, remember that grieving and the sadness, it's everything that's not pure love. That's what that is. It's a cellular release. That's why you find a lot of people, certain people will leave your life at certain times because it's not aligned for them to stay anymore, because you have to go on and do something else and your attachment to them is too strong and you won't go on and do the next thing. So they might exit by death because that's now the time for them to transition, all agreed upon ahead of time. Or they might just leave your life for some other circumstance. Or you might be shown you have to leave theirs. Because they're the one thing that you're attached to in that area. They're the one thing that you're attached to that's going to prevent you in a sense. Now that's going to be true and not true. Nothing's really ever going to prevent us unless we allow it to prevent us, but it's going to hold you back from the next step of your journey, whatever that is for you. And having these things around, these people around, are going to hold you back in a sense, right? So, and I want to get to some sort of stories we put around that, but I want to kind of finish on this, kind of just going through what attachment really is and different ways to look at it. So when you're grieving and you're crying, you're releasing everything that's not pure love for that item, that thing, that person, whatever that is. You're releasing everything that's not pure about it. Because when we have an attachment, we have a story, we have something we want from it. We're not just there because we want to be there. We're there because we're getting something out of it. And that's why we have an attachment to it. It's like you have a string to it, so you can kind of let it go for a little while and then be able to pull it back. You're not 100% letting it go. It's not like a balloon where you just kind of let it go and it just floats up in the air and you're okay if it's there, or if it's not there, it's okay. And if it's there, it's a bonus. But it doesn't have to be there to have anything to do with how you feel. It's not there for you to feel happy or sad. It doesn't really matter. It might enhance certain parts of your life, but it is not a necessity to be there. That's more of the connection aspect when we move from attachment to connection. It can be there, and if it's there, that's awesome. If it's not there, it's not going to affect your inner peace or your inner stability at all. It's not a necessity. Now, a lot of things will come in and out of our life for us to activate feelings within ourselves, ones that we don't have without, well, let me rephrase that. We have it within ourselves, but we didn't know we did, right? We didn't know we could feel that way, whatever that way is. We didn't know we could feel that kind of sadness because it activates that within ourselves. And either it's going to activate it to clear it, or it's going to activate it if it's a love feeling that gets activated, a pure love feeling that gets activated. It shows us we have that inside of ourselves. And the trick is to be able to embody that feeling without having the thing around to facilitate the feeling. Because when we have to have the thing around to facilitate the feeling, whether it's inspiration or love or anger or, grief.
Clear that Melos's go-to.
Sorry. I was listening to something on the computer. if we have to have any of that stuff around, then we get dependent on it, right? And we can't be dependent on it. So a lot of this stuff comes in and out so we can feel what that is, and then we have to carry on that feeling without that thing there. And we also get to this story where, oh no, we can't be without that thing. Or if we go through certain parts of our ascension process, we won't be able to have that thing there. So your ego is going to tell a lot of stories about what can be there and what can't be there. So just understand that your ego is going to do that. It does that for different reasons. It's going to do that so you won't want to make the shift. You won't want to cut the attachment. Now, when we get to cutting the attachment, a good way to start doing that is when you're sleeping. Ask to do it in your dream state. There's a reason why we dream about people leaving. We dream about people dying sometimes before these things kind of occur. People call it precognition, you know, in your dream state. Or you can just look at it as you're looking at a different vibration where these things are occurring. Whether they actually occur here in that way or not doesn't so much matter. But what it's doing is it's getting you used to the idea of that thing not being there. It's getting used to the idea of that thing being gone. And that's sort of what it's doing. So just kind of be aware that when you start doing that, there's a reason. You're utilizing your sleep state to start to disconnect from a lot of things that you might not even realize you're connected to, or the story you have around why you have to have it there. So if there's a story, there's an attachment, there's a cord there. And that all of those will have to be severed at some point during your ascension journey, because you can't really be corded to anything, because it does keep us anchored into old realities. Now, the attachment does, not necessarily the thing. So this is where we're going to get back into how our ego kind of tells us a story. Our ego is going to tell us, oh, well, that thing has to go. That person can't come with us in our next stage of our journey. You know, that person can't go. We can't keep this. We can't do that. All that could be bullshit. It could be true. But you don't know that yet. You know, you don't know 100% what that person's going to do. You don't know 100% how that thing's going to play out. A lot of times, I don't know if I want to say a lot of times, but there comes a lot of times, and especially I could speak just to my journey. I think I have to let something go, and it might be gone for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, or sometimes maybe a little longer than that. And I'll grieve it, and then it usually can come back in. Because what you've done is you've grieved out a lot of the attachment to it. And sometimes that is a process. You know, that's not a quick thing. It can be a quick thing. It depends on the level of attachment. But if you're very, very, very attached to it, whether it be children, whether it be animals, because you'll see a lot of animals kind of do the same thing as people. These things transition out when they're supposed to, when they're keeping you tethered to old timelines, when you're not going to let them go on your own. A lot of these, or it's going to hold you back from something else. These things have sort of a shelf life in a sense. That's going to sound kind of cold to kind of describe it that way, but that's kind of how it is. They sort of have a shelf life. And when their time is up and that timeline is moving on, they have to move on with it. And that's why you see a lot of animals transition during different big life changes for people, whether they're having children are going to college, or, you know, you'll either get new pets, old ones will go, because they're kind of all wrapped up in those old timelines. And it's hard to sometimes pull some of these things apart. And they kind of, everything has to go with that old timeline. Everything has to go with that old vibration that was attached to that timeline. And they can't shift up sometimes. Sometimes they can shift up, but it's us being able to shift them up, in a sense, especially when you're dealing with people. If you don't have the attachment to them, and it's a bonus if they're there, but they don't have to be there for you to be happy or sad or whatever, that's when normally they can come back in. But you'll get to the point where if it's there, it's good, and if it's not, it's going to be okay too. And normally that's when it can come back in. So don't always believe the story you're going to tell yourself, because if you remember, if you're telling yourself a story, your human consciousness is constructing that story to get you to not want to do the move, to not want to move on from that. It's saying, oh, that you won't be able to find that again, or you won't be able to do that again, or you won't be able to have that situation again. Whatever it is, you know, it doesn't really matter. It's going to play out differently for everybody. Look at the energetics of the situation. And then you can really look at the connection, because connection and attachment, you can just weigh the words. Connection is it's a pure word. It's a lighter word, and we can only connect with something as deep as you connect with yourself. So you're going to find things that come in during your ascension process, you'll feel more connected to. You don't feel attached to them, but you feel more connected to them. You feel more intimate in a sense with them. even though that might seem like, you might have had something for 3 weeks, but you feel a deeper connection to it than you did maybe if it's a car or, a space or something you had only had for like, for 10 years, you didn't feel that way about it. And people think it has to do with the thing or the person is why the connection's so much deeper, but it's about yourself. You're connected deeper within yourself. So now you can connect deeper with something else. And it's kind of like you can only love something as much as you love yourself. You can only respect something as much as you respect yourself. So when someone's not respecting you, that happens for a lot of reasons. But remember, people can only respect you as much as they respect themselves. And the same thing goes for us. We can only respect ourselves and respect others as much as we respect ourselves. So when you start to look at connections, look at if you have a story with it. Is it okay if it's there? If it's okay if it's not there? It's okay to have attachments. Just know that eventually all those are going to have to be severed. Now that can be a process. And there are a couple things in my life that I've known I had an attachment to. It was very clear I was very attached to them, and they've kind of exited out a little bit piece by piece for me, but it was enough for me to process, grieve part of it out, and then grieve another part of it out until they're still there. They're just there in a different way. And they are there in a pure way because we don't have the story around and the attachment to the other. If we use a person as an example, we also kind of free them because we're not trying to keep them in our life when it might not be highest line for them. If they're not there, it just means it's not highest line for them to be there. It's not what's best for them. And there's a lot of this journey where it gets to where it's not what's best for them. And it doesn't really matter what's best for us. In that moment, we have to look at other people too. And that's a lot of our ascension journey that happens is we have to take everyone else into account. It's not just about us anymore. In your human consciousness, it's all about you. Us, that's what we cared about. We cared about ourselves. We didn't really care about anybody else in the equation. Someone else might have been there, but we really didn't look at them in any particular way. Now we have to look at it and go, okay, what about everybody else here? Am I trying to keep people here because I don't want to let them go? Because I've constructed a story around, I'm attached to them. They represent something for me. They represent a part of my life for me, my human existence, whatever it is. So just be aware when you're doing that. And ask to sever the attachments. And if it's something you super duper attached to, and you are, you can always just say, be kind to me with that one. And that's one thing I would say. I say it before I go to sleep. I'd just be talking to myself, higher aspects of me. And I'd just say, okay, universe, just be kind to me with that. Because I know I'm attached to that. I'm going to work on severing that attachment. We're going to every night work on severing that attachment. Just be kind to me. Because I know it's there and I'm going to work on it. So don't believe the story that the thing won't be there on the other side. Normally it is in some capacity. You have to not have the attachment to the thing. And then really technically anything can be there. Because it's just a bonus at that point. So, okay. Keep practicing the art of intuition.